So throughout today, we have lots of different segments for you. Originally, we were going to be a 7-hour conference. We didn't think anyone wanted to sit 7 hours on Zoom. So for those of you who followed up with more questions for Jill, who didn't get a chance to have those answered, we're going to be taking notes about them, and we will find a way to address all of those questions and release them possibly in YouTube videos afterwards. You guys are asking some really fantastic questions. That was the Flores exhibits. Go ahead and check the website in the chat, follow up with that. They have done some fantastic work highlighting stories of what's happening in our country in relationship to keeping the Flores settlement. So today you're going to probably be on a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. We are going to have some really beautiful stories to tell you, some incredible things happening with our business leaders, with our churches, with our law enforcement leaders. And then we're going to have some really hard things to look at, such as what we just saw. Today, what I'd love you to do is just sit in tension. We are not here to paint a picture of anything as all bad or all good. We want to sit with the complexity of where we're at right now as a country in relation to the subject of immigration, and then how we are all handling it. So we're going to have those tensions, and I hope that you find, as we look at them, that it's a good learning experience, and that through learning about what's good and what's hard and what's not working and what is working, we can together advocate to have better policies. At the National Immigration Forum, we always say we want to be a nation of laws and a nation of grace, and I hope that you will see that in the story arc of today. I'd love to welcome our next panel, Stacey, Damian, and Susan, to join me. We are going to have a little conversation about dignity in our immigration laws and policies. So I'll let them just get themselves situated with their videos and their microphones. All right, welcome. I'm so grateful for you guys being here today. I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. We'll start with Damian. Could you share your name, what you do, and where you live?
My name is Damian Jackson. I am born and raised in Akron, Ohio. I still currently live in Akron, Ohio. I don't think I'm going anywhere anytime soon. I currently work with teens in foster care. So I work with the independent living sector. Essentially, we take kids who are transitioning from childhood to adulthood, and we're kind of the gap in between that helps them prepare for when they don't have the safety net of social services anymore.
All right, Susan, I'll have you take it next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Berg-Herman. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Asian Services in Action, or better known as ASIA. We work with the refugee and immigrant population here in Northeast Ohio from any and all countries. And I'm based here in Akron, Ohio.
All right, Stacey?
Good morning. My name is Stacey Cozart Martin, and I am an immigration attorney. Our practice is located in Independence, Ohio, and I have been practicing immigration law for approximately 20 years.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. And Stacey, we'll start with you. Could you give us some broad pictures of the last 20 years in immigration law? And then I know we privately had talked about this being a little bit of an unprecedented time to practice immigration law. Could you kind of give us a broad picture as well as what's happening in this moment?
Absolutely. So, Christina, when we talked about this initially, I went back and I did a lot of research on the history of immigration law, even beyond the 20 years. And I want to say first and foremost, unfortunately, I can't see everyone who is a participant in this program, but if we could look around the room at each other, I think we could see that sometime in our lineage, some family member, how distant it may be, made a decision for us to come here into the United States and for a better life for all of us. And I think at the heart of immigration, it's important for us all to remember that we all came from somewhere else to help America become what it is today. And so looking at the immigration history, whether Democrat or Republican, to be honest, there has been always a constant battle in somehow balancing people coming into the US and keeping bad people out of the US. And under the current administration, the policies have been basically one of fear, and not only preventing those who have maybe tried to file for asylum in the US, but at this current point, we're also keeping out those who are legally coming to the US, and those are employees, those are families. And this is probably, like Christina said, the worst time I've seen immigration law in the 20 years I've been practicing. Under President Obama, where really family detention started, he was known as the deporter in chief, right? He deported approximately 5 million foreign nationals. This administration, in its first 3 years, has only deported 800,000 foreign nationals. And so we understand that there has to be an immigration balance. I don't think anybody is saying everyone has to come in. There has to be a priority. And under the Obama administration, the priority was people who had criminal records. And because he focused on people who had criminal records, it was easier and more humane when we did end up having to remove or deport people. Under the current administration, we're putting children in cages, and we are separating them from the loved ones that they have entered this country with. And I want to say that again, we as a nation are putting children in cages and separating them from their families, moms, dads, aunts, uncles. And there are children that were separated at the border in 2017 that still have not been reunited with their families. And so I think as humans, there has to be a fix to this. And we've tried comprehensive immigration reform. It was under Reagan, then we tried again under Clinton, then we tried again under Obama. And it's just, the system is broken and it has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed in a humane way. No one is saying everyone can come to the US. But we do want the best and the brightest, and we do want to be a nation where we can open our arms to people who are struggling in their home countries through a process. Absolutely, no one's saying let's open the borders and allow everybody to flood in. And so because of the current situation, I haven't seen it this bad. Fear amongst physicians who are practicing in major hospitals in the Cleveland area shouldn't be happening.
Thank you, Stacey. Those are some really hard things to think about. And that brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask Damian. As we talk about our system being broken, Damian, would you share some of what you've seen through your work that kind of showcases how this is affecting children?
So from time to time, I will receive into our program a child that has been ripped away from their parents due to the policy for deportation. So, you know, unfortunately, the current administration and administrations before it have essentially forced us, have forced kids into foster care. It cost us a lot. It cost the child a lot. There's a ton of trauma that is involved when it comes to ripping a child away from their parent. So for me, I've seen a ton of just trauma. When an adult loses their parent, they have a hard time processing it. We are asking children to do the same thing. They don't have the mental capacity for it. When you're a child, your parent is your entire world. So essentially what our immigration policy is doing is on purpose, intentionally, causing trauma in young children that don't have the ability to process that type of trauma.
Thank you. And you mentioned as well, it's really costly to the taxpayer. Do you know those numbers exactly? Like, what does that mean? I mean, we should care emotionally for children, but I don't think everyone's aware of the financial cost as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. The argument usually is it costs us a lot to have immigrants here. What happens is if an immigrant comes across the border and they have a child, if that child is a naturalized citizen, only the parents get deported. When the parents get deported, we have to take care of the child. We take care of the child. My program charges $165 a day per child. So it's $165 a day per child. If you do some quick math, you'll put it right around $60,000 per year. And that's just to house and feed that child. On top of that, there are mental health services that we have to pay for. We have to take them to the doctor. We have to take them to the dentist. We have to buy them shoes, clothes. To round off, it takes us right around $100,000 per year per kid to take care of parents to take care of kids that don't have parents.
Wow, that's really significant. Susan, I'd love to turn to you. You've worked with those who have been former refugees for many years in resettlement and then in services after they were adjusting to the country. What exactly has happened in light of refugee resettlement? And could you explain a little bit about the legality or illegality of refugees? I think that's kind of a confusing term for a lot of people.
Yeah, so when we talk about the word resettlement or, refugee, it's actually, people don't, I think the term refugee is used loosely, but here in the United States, there's a United Nations definition for refugee, but the United States has a formal refugee resettlement system, which has been in place since World War II, when we helped folks start life anew here in the United States. So it's a long-standing tradition of the United States to bring in refugees. They're invited by the US government. They are not crossing, when they come through the US resettlement system, they are invited here and they are afforded certain protections and rights. And so we've seen that number, it's always had bipartisan support, always. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter, always been there. But currently it's been unprecedented in the fact that it has been halted almost in entirety. And of course now with COVID, it has been essentially halted. And I think for people to understand, obviously it's not just the humane aspect of it, but also that the folks coming here, it's, we don't, I hate to say this, but it's true. We just don't, the United States doesn't just let refugees in out of the goodness of our hearts. I mean, I'd like to think that is the truth, but it's also good foreign policy, and it's part of this country's long-standing foreign policy. And let me just give one example of what that means. So when our troops are at war, and they've been in Afghanistan now for a long time, right? Who helps take care of our troops in Afghanistan? The Afghan people who are fighting for their rights alongside the United States. And it is those individuals that are afforded refugee status coming into this country. And so if we want to protect our troops and we want to let them have interpreters so they can communicate with the people, do intelligence and all of that, we provide certain rights to those who help us. And those people are unable to come. And so personally, I feel for our troops and our generals who are trying to lead democracy and ways and protect our troops. And now we can't in turn bring those folks here.
Thank you, Susan. And that reminds me of a bunch of stories I've heard very recently of military commanders, majors. I met with a friend who's a major in the Army who desperately wanted me to allow a family to come from Iraq. They were an incredibly redemptive story in his time of serving over there. And I had to tell him I spoke with the family through a translator, and I had to say, there's no way we can bring this family here. And he just was shocked that a very needed, advocated by the military humanitarian situation, there was no way for them to come. We were supposed to have a former officer on today, and they ended up having to have a major surgery. So we will be interviewing them and putting them on the forum videos in the future of their story and talking about SIV and folks who have worked alongside the military in a more specific way in his work with translators in Afghanistan especially. So thank you for highlighting that, Susan. Stacey, could you give any examples on trends in immigration legislation that have affected Ohioans? So I think sometimes we can think this is really far away, and then if anyone else wants to add to that after Stacey, I think it's helpful for us to put ourselves in perspective.
I agree. I think it's important first to know that immigration, like Susan said, it doesn't happen overnight. There are rules and regulations that have to be followed for someone to be able to come to the US on a visa or even a green card. And I think the two biggest problems currently are that this administration is trying to halt, like I said before, not only undocumented immigration, but legal immigration. And so there is currently a travel ban for those individuals who want to enter the United States on an H-2B and an H-1B. And what that means for our community is that the H-2B workers are temporary workers. They come here for a season, they perform work, and then they go back home. So for small companies like landscaping companies or concrete laborers, small businesses are shutting down in Ohio because they don't have the workforce to be able to provide the needed work for the community. So we have several clients who have shut their doors because they just do not have the American workforce to keep going when the H-2B workers were precluded from coming into the US. And then on the other side, the H-1B workers. So H-1B workers are those workers who require some type of education, a specialized occupation. So that's our doctors, that's our engineers, those are our IT computer people, right? And so because of the travel ban, no H-1B worker is coming in. And I want to step back and say, when you're processing an H-1B, you are an employer who registered with the Department of Labor back in March. You paid the fees. You may or may not have gotten selected because there is a cap of 85,000 numbers. Last year, over 200,000 people applied for that cap. So you can see what your odds are already. Then you get selected in the cap. You have to submit your paperwork with the Immigration Service. And then your start date, if everything is approved and processed timely, is October. So employers are really planning their workforce almost a year in advance of a needed worker. And now they've got selected under the cap. They may have their approval notices, but they can't come in. So this is halting business. We represent a lot of the hospitals in the Cleveland area. Doctors aren't getting in. Residents aren't starting their residency programs. Engineers aren't coming in to do the work that's needed to be done. And so this, outside of COVID, is affecting financially companies who have planned for this employee for over a year to start working with them. And so we have to remember, although we have a big scheme of how immigration is affecting the nation as a whole, it affects the mom and pop shops, it affects your local small businesses, and it affects all the way up to the huge hospitals who can't bring the current residents in for their current residency year. So it does have an impact across the nation, but specifically in Ohio, because we have a huge medical community and we have a huge agricultural community.
Thank you, Stacey. Really appreciate it. So we're starting to get questions in the chat. For the last few minutes of our section, feel free to add your questions and we'll try to get to them. This is probably a quick one. I think I know the answer, but question for Damian. Does your program work with other groups that do work with foster care? I'm assuming that's other ethnicities other than immigrants, but maybe, I don't know if you could read that question in a different way.
So yes and no. We don't have a specific ethnicity that we're working with. We just work with foster care in general. We've just seen a kind of influx of children of immigrants coming into the system. We partner with a ton of organizations. There's, Red Oak Behavioral Health and, Ohio Guidestone and a ton of other things that we kind of partner with. But our agency is essentially our agency for the most part. I hope that answers the question.
Great. I think it does. That's really helpful. Thank you, Damian. And then this is one I guess anyone could answer. Can you highlight the economic benefits of immigrants and refugees coming into our country through their contributions to the community and tax dollars? Would any of you have any studies or things that you could highlight in that area?
Well, I think Stacey offered for, students, our international students, but also our highly qualified immigrants who are working. Obviously, they come and spend money and contribute to the economy. Those of us in refugee world, refugees have to have a place to live. They pay that rent themselves, so they fill the rental market, and then 25% or so go on to buy a home. And so they're building those assets. You have to remember we have a significant population decline in the United States, so our tax base is going down. So we need more people to contribute to taxes and income and spending power, small business development, so those are just a few of the things, just local, so that they contribute to the economy.
Thank you.
Christina, when you asked us to do this, I actually did a little bit of research and found that just in Ohio alone, immigrants have founded more than 20,000 businesses, including Procter & Gamble, which I thought was pretty interesting. And also, the undocumented workforce actually contributed $23.6 billion to the economy and never will see a dime in Social Security because they are undocumented and will never be able to get that benefit. And so I think it's important to remember that undocumented workers are contributing a mass amount of revenue into a system that they will never benefit from. They're filing taxes and they're getting their taxes taken out and they're getting Social Security taken out of their paychecks that they're never going to receive.